Hello YouTubers and cinephiles, welcome back to another edition of Nerd With Me Reviews. I'm John Ricky. Today's review is going to be a nice hidden gem that probably a good number of people have forgotten about. A nice sci-fi film called M.I.A, starring Dennis Quaid at the height of his popularity. And I have to say, I think this film is just so overlooked. It's almost criminal. If you look at this film now, it is so topical today as it really was back then, but nobody was really seeing it at the time. M.I.A also starred Louis Gossett Jr. Y'all may not know him today, but he was the shit in the 80s and maybe a little bit of the 90s, but that was his zenith right there. It was right after he won an Oscar for Officer and a Gentleman, 3 years removed, because this movie came out in 1985. He won Best Supporting Actor for Officer and a Gentleman in 1982, technically 1983, but semantics, whatever. Either way, the man was on fire. Dennis Quaid was on fire at the time. I believe this is like about a year or two before Inner Space, if you know about that, or if you haven't seen it. It's an amazing sci-fi comedy film. It's awesome. The reason I call this film a hidden gem is because it actually really just personifies the global situation that was happening at the time. Now, this was at the height of the Cold War between the U.S. and Russia. They were threatening each other, so on and so forth. I mean, if you had history class, you know about it. Now, the storyline for the film, for Enemy Mine, is actually very simple. Think of Castaway and then put it during wartime, and there's two people rather than just one. So, you have the Tom Hanks character, you have the other person from the other side, you have Enemy Mine. Now you just add on a sci-fi twist to it. That's what you have for Enemy Mine. Dennis Quaid and Louis Gossett Jr. play obviously the opposing characters who eventually form a bond in Art of Survival. Dennis Quaid plays ace pilot named Willis Davidge, and Louis Gossett Jr. plays a pilot for the alien race called Drax by the name of Jariba, aka he becomes known as Jerry throughout the story. Now, both are ace pilots, and how the story starts out is, you got cocky Davidge, going out on a mission. He's done this 100 times before, and he gets into a dogfight with Jerry, or Jariba, aka Jerry. They shoot each other down. Unfortunately, they both land on the same desolate planet that has not been inhabited by anybody in like forever. They're lost. They have no way of communicating with their respective civilizations, so they're considered M.I.A, or even killed in action. In the meantime, they have to bring out hope that they will survive on this desolate planet, that they gotta brave the elements. That's a basic story. Now, 90% of this film is literally just Louis Gossett Jr. and Dennis Quaid alone on this planet, just braving the elements. And they make very interesting situations that happen, and they're great character development situations that happen, and gradually they become closer. I mean, of course, when you have this type of story, of course these adversaries, I mean, they were at each other's throats from the word go, but eventually situation caused them to actually form a friendship and even have some very comedic moments that really add to their dynamic with each other. For the fact that Drax, or rather Jerry, I mean, he doesn't know anything about human culture or anything like that, and Davidge doesn't know anything about his culture. So you get a nice window into, oh hey, this is a day in the life, this is their culture, this is their culture, and eventually they kind of start becoming one and becoming just fast friends, just braving the elements of this whole incredibly treacherous planet. There's this great moment between Davidge and Jerry involving a situation where they get into a big argument, and let's say it involves Disney in a way that's just like, it's just completely hilarious and out of nowhere, but it works to a very subtle, but once you notice it, it is just amazingly hilarious and just heartfelt. And that's what's great about this film, is the fact that it's really delves into very poignant themes about like tolerance and intolerance, of not knowing the other side of the situation, like basically see the other side of the coin of the argument. In a way, the interactions with these two main characters, Jerry and Davidge, it almost feels like you could actually put it as kind of a prequel to what happened with Spock and Kirk. I mean, because Davidge is like headstrong, he's cocky beyond belief, and Jerry is more logical and by the book, so on and so forth, for his culture, and he doesn't deviate from that. And eventually they almost become one, especially when you find the revelation that Jerry's race reproduces in a different way. Basically, they're a reptilian race, so if you know anything about biology or whatnot, it's like, you know, some animals can reproduce asexually. He does. Eventually he has a child, and let's just say situations happen where it's now down to Davidge to take care of the child and grow it up. And unfortunately, they're on this planet for years, you know, probably a good 10, and you feel the passage of time. But that's the great thing about this film, is the fact that you don't feel the time itself. I mean, it's well paced. I mean, especially mainly due to the direction of Wolfgang Petersen. If you don't know who Wolfgang Petersen is, if you ever heard of a movie called Das Boot, I mean, that's probably one of the best films in probably German history. I mean, it is an incredible submarine film, so on and so forth. But this is also the gentleman that brought us Troy with Brad Pitt and Orlando Bloom and Eric Bana, all them, and In the Line of Fire, Outbreak, Air Force One with Harrison Ford. The guy is basically a legend. And this is one of the great movies. Also, A Never-Ending Story, which is another like fantasy film that I'm like, oh my god, that's an amazing film. But besides that, he crafts a story that's really just, it still resonates today. Like, with present day situation that's happening right now, this would actually be one of the films that I'd put up for, like, if anything's going to be remade, this would be a candidate that should be at the top of the list. I mean, seriously. I mean, it is so much more powerful than how it was received back then. It would be received probably better this day and age, because there is a decent amount more tolerance a little bit, and people are more into the political sphere, especially with social media expanding everybody and so on and so forth. But I really think that it could really benefit from a remake today. Not to say that this movie is like horrible bystanders. Nah, this is a great film in its own right, in its time. I mean, the visual effects of the time were top notch. I mean, this movie cost $40 million to make. At that time, $40 million is probably, by today's standards, that's probably like a $120 million movie by today's standards. So, but unfortunately, since it cost that much to make, it barely made a profit. But besides that, it is a very, very well crafted film. But I will say this, there's one flaw I think is pretty evident with this. Around like the third act, it felt like it was a different kind of movie, but it still seemed like it served the story well. First two acts of the movie are just phenomenally incredible and really just set the standard. Like I said, if you watch Castaway, you have seen Enemy Mine, except Castaway is just more present day rather than being a futuristic or time epic and so on and so forth. But I still say this is a movie that is worth watching. This gets an A+ for me, and I really suggest that you seek it out on whatever YouTube or Hulu, whatever service you have, Redbox. Look for this hidden gem. It is amazing. It is fun, and it is very intriguing, and you will not regret it. Anyway, guys, please comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think. I'll keep bringing you these little gems. Let's talk about them, alright? Check it out. Anyway, I'll talk to y'all later, guys. Take care.